Thanks, Lascan. I'm delighted to be able to contribute briefly on this very important the Greyhound Racing Bill 2018. And of course, it's been a long time coming before us, Minister. We had, as many deputies have said, in 2014 the Indicon report, which highlighted many serious deficiencies in the industry. In 2015, we had the report by the Joint Committee on Agriculture, Food and the Marine. And of course, in July 2016, we had the Morris review of the anti-doping and medication in Ireland, which was commissioned by Board na Gán. And sadly, of course, all three reports found major issues with governance and regulation in dog racing. I'd like to commend my colleagues in the Shannon, in particular Senator Lynn Ruane and her staff and the Civic Engagement Group on the amendments that they put forward to the Minister there, trying to improve the bill. I believe there are still opportunities to greatly strengthen areas of the bill, especially around animal welfare, and I totally agree with my colleague Deputy O'Sullivan that it's in the whole area of sanctions that we need to be taking action in relation to the well-intentioned provisions of many parts of this bill, and also, of course, in relation to the export of greyhounds. I was pleased, obviously, to see that the amendment about the gathering of export data was accepted by a Minister and is included in this version of the bill. I mean, when you look at the bill, I think it does seem comprehensive, an attempt to have a comprehensive look, I suppose, at the major elements of the dog racing industry. I noticed that, for example, in Section 13, one of the four aims is the governance, development, promotion, but also the health and welfare of the animals. And you'd have to say that throughout the bill, maybe the references to health and welfare are fairly minimal, and that's perhaps the big weakness that jumps out of you. When you look at Part 3, for example, the racing and racetracks, sections 2021, all of the new or the strengthened regulation you're bringing in relation to permits to people who work in the industry and so on is welcome. Part 4 as well in relation to training and public sale, similar kind of licensing and permits, all of that is welcome. And obviously Section 27 and 28 in relation to substances and traceability. But in all of that, I think, Minister, your role will be key, and the Department's role will be key in the enforcement of these provisions. And perhaps that's something you might come back to, how exactly you're going to request the new Taoiseach na Gán board to actually implement those sections. That's what we'll all be studying. I think people who love dog racing, but also who love the industry, want to protect the dogs, and I accept that includes many owners and followers. That's what we'll be looking at in particular, and that's why I think Part 6 is very important, Minister. The authorised officers, and I think you have given a wide range of functions there in relation to them, and anyone who tries to interfere with their business of inspections, and the fact that the power of search warrants, support on Garda Síochána and so on, and then Part 7 and Part 8 in relation to the investigations and then the system, which ultimately could lead to the district court. Elements of that I think are meritorious, but it really depends on how you actually implement that, Minister. Almost 2 years ago, as you know, I introduced the Welfare of Greyhounds Amendment Bill 2017, which would amend the 2011 Act, Minister, to provide for the control of export of greyhounds and for the publication of a whitelist to which the export of greyhounds under licence, whitelist of countries to which the export of greyhounds under licence would only be permissible. And the whitelist was to be drafted by the welfare members of the International Greyhound Forum in conjunction with Board na Gán, now, as I say, Taoiseach Dail Eireann, and by this legislation. The countries on the whitelist will be those which, and I quote, meet minimum standards with regard to the welfare of greyhounds, and the past records, of course, of relevant countries, including enforceable welfare provisions for greyhounds equivalent to protections available in Ireland, would have to be taken into account. And of course, when you hear the horror stories from China, from Pakistan, from various other countries that our dogs are being treated in such a savage manner, it brings home to you that the essential nature of this, and I would hope my colleague Deputy O'Sullivan, myself and others, that we will try and amend the bill to ask you to do this. My private member's bill, of course, would also make an offence for persons to export greyhounds to countries, as said, not on the list, and would provide for all the related matters, and it still remains, of course, Lascan on the clár of the Dáil. Now, of course, you've said, Minister, that Board was responsible for governance, regulation and development, and that would include all the elements in relation to the Animal Health and Welfare Act, the 2011 Act, its Code of Practice and so on. But the Code of Practice, of course, isn't on a statutory footing, and therefore we've had to deal with. We've also, of course, had the problem of, you've mentioned the problem of secondary exports, because the fact of the matter is, I think, is it the case, Minister, that of the 7 or 8 million dogs on the island of Britain, I don't know, well, 80% of the racing dogs are our dogs, but there's a huge number of the other dogs are also Irish dogs. And by the way, Minister, on March 30th, the morning of March 30th, it looks like Britain will be a third country. And I just wondered, I mean, are you taking any steps with your colleague, Deputy Creed? Are you taking any steps to negotiate with the British in relation to, indeed, all of our agri-food exports, but in particular in relation to our dogs and the protection and good treatment of the dogs? And to be fair, hopefully most people who buy Irish dogs are dog lovers. They have that tradition in the other island, just like we have. But it's really important that would be addressed. I also got support last count of Nessa Childers MEP in Europe, and of course she also relevant. She mentioned the bad treatment sometimes of the Spanish greyhounds, the Galgos Españoles in Spain as well. So it's an issue, not just, if you like, pertaining to Ireland. And she told me that the Court of Auditors was going to audit the EU Animal Welfare Strategy 2012-2015. So obviously there's another area that we can approach that as well. It's important to note, of course, that the Greyhound Board, the existing Board did welcome the government's bill and said that the bill would offer further opportunities to grow the industry and extend its appeal to a wider audience. But it also says the welfare of greyhounds continues to be their #1 priority. But if that was the case, we wouldn't be here with this legislation today. And unfortunately, it couldn't possibly be the #1 priority. So I'd like to commend Dogs Trust, the ISPCA and PAWS and all the other animal welfare and dog welfare groups, all the work they've done on this issue, and I know they've liaised closely with you as well, Minister. And from working, I think, with my colleague here, Deputy O'Sullivan, other opposition deputies and senators, liaising with the Minister, submitting reports to the Ag Committee, the determination of those civic society groups to improve welfare standards for greyhounds is to be applauded. Dogs Trust, of course, is a member of the International Greyhound Forum, along with, as I said, the ISPCA, PAWS and the Irish Blue Cross. And of course, Dogs Trust last April, Minister, they launched Grey Watch to highlight, of course, what fantastic pets greyhounds and lurchers make. And the very helpful Oireachtas Library Service, of course, highlights the fact that, Minister, over the last 10 years, I think, over 116 million from the Horse and Greyhound Bill, I'm including the 2019 the 2019 funding in that has been transferred to Board obviously some exchequer income in the fund did decline, and we were informed last year, and I think the Minister and other speakers have mentioned, there's an estimated 5,000 full and part-time jobs in the sector with an estimated 7,300 greyhound owners, and we were told that the multiplier effect of dog racing is something like 300 million. But these statistics, I think, are all the more reason why we should establish, definitively establish and maintain the highest possible welfare standards in the breeding, racing and the export of these wonderful animals. And animals, indeed, Minister, which have kind of become symbolic of our nation. Other countries kind of recognise that this is the sort of maybe the Irish dog, despite the wolfhound and so on, par excellence. I noticed other stats quoted in our excellent Library and Research Service research document on the bill. It does give very good insight, but also worrying details about the industry. The Coursing Club figures showed registered litters declining from 3,000 or so per annum in 2010-11 down to just over 2,500 in 2016, with 18,000 plus greyhounds born in 2010 declining to 15,000 in 2016. But in the same period, nearly 3,000 greyhounds were surrendered to the dog pounds, with just under 2,500 of those put to sleep. And Greyhound Rescue, of course, Association, they also tell us that something like 10,000 dogs are missing from official stats in the period 2010 to 2015. You know, it is disappointing that you can get some very high ambitions in Board na Gán reports and from the department and so on, but you know, the reality on the ground can be different. And I think you've said, Minister Isler, that there's to be another Indecon strategic review on the infrastructure services and standard facilities at Shelbourne Park and the remaining, I think, 15 stadiums. Of course, in 2017, we had the controversial sale of the 5-acre Harold's Cross Greyhound Stadium for 23 million from Board na Gán, or was it 26 million, to the Department of Education, which gave a surplus, obviously, to Board na Gán to deal with you know, its then financial crisis. Of course, because it was such a successful stadium, a lot of people in the South Inner City thought that it was a very strange decision. I've other things to say, but we'll get a chance perhaps at committee and report stage, Minister. So while the bill is comprehensive, I mean, the application of the bill will be the key to it, and in particular in relation to the welfare of these lovely dogs. It's so long delayed and belated bill. I do hope it will greatly improve the governance and administration of the new Board na Gán, and it will also go some way to stamping out you know, what have been quite serious abuses in the industry. But I think the continuing dangers of dreadful abuse and death for our animals through exports to secondary countries, Minister, remains a very serious problem. And perhaps you could work with the UK to actually ensure that secondary exports through the UK will be on a whitelist basis. Thanks, Can.